My name is Lana, and I'm a 32-year-old elementary school teacher from Boston. Teaching has always been my passion, but nothing brings me more joy than spending time with my niece Amy and nephew Kevin. They're 7 and 5, and they mean the world to me. I never imagined that my love for them would lead to such a painful family rift. It all started when my parents called me cheap for babysitting without asking for money. One day, I was the helpful aunt. The next, I was a villain for setting boundaries. The worst part, being cut off from the children I adore. Before I get into my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life family stories like mine. I grew up as the middle child, between my older sister Jessica, who's 36 now, and my younger brother Thomas, who's 28. From the very beginning, Jessica was always considered the golden child in our family. She excelled at everything she touched, from academics to sports to music. Our parents never tried to hide their pride in her achievements, and sometimes it felt like Thomas and I were just living in her shadow. While I did well enough in school, I never reached the heights that Jessica did. She graduated at the top of her class, went to an Ivy League college, and eventually became a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm. I took a different path, pursuing my passion for education and becoming an elementary school teacher. I love my job and find it incredibly fulfilling, even if it doesn't come with the status or paycheck that Jessica's career does. 5 years ago, Jessica married Ryan, a successful businessman who comes from old money. They live in a beautiful home in an exclusive neighborhood, drive luxury cars, and generally enjoy a lifestyle that's completely different from my modest apartment and teacher's salary. I've never been jealous of their wealth, though. I've always believed that happiness comes from doing what you love, not from material possessions. About a year after their wedding, Jessica gave birth to Amy, and 2 years later, Kevin arrived. From the moment I first held each of them, I felt an instant connection. There's something special about being an aunt, a unique relationship that's different from being a parent, but still incredibly meaningful. I would visit them whenever I could, bringing small gifts and spending hours playing with them, reading to them, and just enjoying their company. As the children grew, Jessica's workload at her law firm increased dramatically. She was pursuing partnership, which meant long hours at the office, weekend work, and a lot of business travel. Ryan was also busy with his own business ventures, often away for days at a time. That's when they started asking me to help with childcare. It started casually enough. Jessica would call and ask if I could watch the kids for a few hours while she attended an important meeting, or if Ryan was out of town. I was always happy to help. I loved spending time with Amy and Kevin, and it gave me a chance to bond with them in a way that might not have been possible otherwise. The children and I developed our own little rituals and traditions. I taught Amy how to read her first words, and we would spend hours going through picture books together. Kevin and I would build elaborate structures with his blocks and create stories about the people who lived in them. We baked cookies together, went to the park, visited museums, and just enjoyed each other's company. Jessica and Ryan were appreciative at first. They would thank me profusely, tell me how much the kids loved spending time with me, and occasionally bring me a bottle of wine or a gift card as a token of their gratitude. It felt good to be needed and valued, to be an important part of the children's lives. What I didn't realize then was that this casual arrangement was the beginning of a pattern that would eventually lead to one of the most painful periods of my life. The occasional babysitting request would soon become regular expectation, and my generosity would be taken for granted in ways I couldn't have imagined. But in those early days, everything seemed perfect. I was the doting aunt who loved spending time with her niece and nephew, and my sister and brother-in-law seemed genuinely grateful for my help. Little did I know how quickly things would change, or how my own family would turn against me when I finally stood up for myself. Over the next 2 years, what had started as occasional babysitting gradually turned into a much more demanding arrangement. Jessica's calls became more frequent, more urgent, and often came with less and less notice. What began as a few hours here and there evolved into full weekends, overnights, and sometimes entire weeks during school vacations when I wasn't teaching. My own social life began to suffer. Friends stopped inviting me to events because they knew I'd likely cancel if Jessica called. Dating became nearly impossible as I never knew when I'd be free. More than once, I had to cut short or cancel dates when Jessica would call with some emergency that required my immediate attention. Usually, these emergencies turned out to be work functions or social events that she had known about for weeks but hadn't bothered to tell me about until the last minute. Despite the growing imposition on my time, I never complained. These were my niece and nephew after all, and I loved them deeply. Their excited faces when they saw me walk through the door made every sacrifice seem worthwhile. We continued our special activities, expanding our repertoire as they grew. I taught Amy how to ride a bike in the park near my apartment. Kevin and I planted a small container garden on my balcony, growing tomatoes and herbs that he was immensely proud of. All these activities cost money, of course. I was spending more and more of my modest teacher's salary on the children buying art supplies, books, ingredients for baking projects, admission to museums and children's events, and countless small toys and treats. I never asked Jessica or Ryan to reimburse me for any of these expenses. In my mind, this was part of being a good aunt, and I took pride in providing these experiences for Amy and Kevin. Meanwhile, Jessica and Ryan's lifestyle became increasingly lavish. Jessica made partner at her law firm, which came with a substantial raise. They joined an exclusive country club, renovated their already beautiful home, and took luxury vacations to exotic destinations. They bought new cars and designer clothes. Money was clearly not an issue for them, which made it all the more noticeable that they never offered to pay me for my time or reimburse me for the expenses I incurred while caring for their children. I began to notice other troubling patterns as well. Jessica would tell me she'd be home by 8, but wouldn't arrive until after 10 without so much as a text message to let me know she'd be late. Several times she and Ryan canceled family events at the last minute because something more important came up at work, leaving me to explain to disappointed children why their parents wouldn't be coming after all. The worst instance came when Jessica and Ryan decided to take a 3-week vacation to Europe, visiting France, Italy, and Greece. They asked if I could watch the children for the entire time. It happened to fall during summer break, so I was technically available, but 3 weeks was a long commitment. Still, I agreed because I couldn't bear the thought of Amy and Kevin being left with strangers for so long. Those 3 weeks were both wonderful and exhausting. I essentially moved into Jessica and Ryan's house, taking care of all aspects of the children's lives from breakfast to bedtime, day after day. We had a lot of fun together, but it was also a tremendous responsibility. By the end, I was physically and emotionally drained. When Jessica and Ryan returned tanned and refreshed from their luxury vacation, they barely acknowledged the sacrifice I'd made. Jessica breezed in with souvenirs for the children and a small bottle of perfume for me, as if that somehow compensated for 3 weeks of round-the-clock childcare. Ryan thanked me briefly before disappearing into his home office to catch up on work emails. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, which seemed eerily quiet after weeks of children's laughter, I felt the first real stirrings of resentment. I loved Amy and Kevin with all my heart, but I was beginning to feel used by my sister and brother-in-law. I had used all of my own vacation days to care for their children, while they enjoyed a lavish European tour, and they couldn't even be bothered to properly thank me. Still, I pushed these feelings aside. They were family after all, and the children needed me. I told myself that the joy of being with Amy and Kevin was compensation enough that I shouldn't expect anything more. Little did I know that things were about to come to a head in a way that would change our family dynamics forever. The confrontation that would ultimately tear our family apart happened at a Sunday dinner at my parents' house. These dinners were a long-standing tradition, and the whole family was expected to attend whenever possible. Jessica and Ryan arrived late as usual, but in particularly high spirits. Over the main course, Jessica announced that she and Ryan had just booked a 2-week ski trip to Aspen for the upcoming winter break. She described the luxury resort they'd be staying at, the exclusive restaurants they'd reserved, and the private ski instructor they'd hired. My parents were appropriately impressed, asking all the right questions, and exclaiming over the photos Jessica showed them on her phone. Then, as if it were an afterthought, Jessica turned to me and said, "Oh, Lana, we'll need you to watch the kids while we're gone. It's during your school break, right?" It wasn't a request. It was an expectation. And something in me finally snapped. "Actually, Jessica," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "if you want me to watch Amy and Kevin for 2 weeks, I think it would be fair if you compensated me for my time." The table went silent. Jessica's fork clattered against her plate, and Ryan looked up from his phone in surprise. My mother's mouth fell open, and my father's brows knitted together in confusion. "Compensate you," Jessica finally said, her voice rising. "They're your niece and nephew, not some stranger's kids. I know that," I replied, feeling my heart rate increasing. "And I love them dearly. But 2 weeks is a long time, and I've been watching them more and more frequently without any recognition of the time and money I put into it." "Money you put into it," Jessica scoffed. "What money? We provide everything they need." "No, you don't," I countered, feeling years of unspoken frustrations bubbling up. "I buy them books, art supplies, take them to museums and events. I spend my own money on ingredients when we bake together on plants for our gardening projects, on small toys and treats. Not to mention the time I spend, which is valuable too." "I can't believe what I'm hearing," my father interjected, his face reddening. "Are you really being this cheap, Lana? These are your sister's children, your own flesh and blood. It's not about being cheap, Dad." I tried to explain, but he cut me off. "It absolutely is. Jessica has always been there for you. And now when she needs your help, you're asking for payment, like some kind of hired help." My mother jumped in, her tone disapproving. "Lana, dear, you should be grateful for the opportunity to spend time with the children. It's good practice for when you have your own family someday. Besides, it's not like you have a demanding career like your sister." That stung. The implication was clear. My job as a teacher wasn't as important or valuable as Jessica's career as a lawyer. The fact that I had used my own vacation days to accommodate their European trip went completely unacknowledged. Jessica, sensing she had the upper hand with our parents firmly on her side, went for the emotional jugular. "I thought you loved Amy and Kevin," she said, her eyes welling with tears that I strongly suspected were manufactured for effect. "But I guess your love has a price tag. How sad for them to learn their aunt only wants to be with them if she's being paid." "That's not fair," I said, feeling my own eyes fill with genuine tears. "You know I adore those children. But you and Ryan live a life of luxury while I struggle to make ends meet on a teacher's salary. You just booked a 2-week ski vacation at a 5-star resort in Aspen, but you can't offer me any compensation for giving up my entire break to watch your children." "We shouldn't have to pay family for helping out." Ryan finally spoke, his tone condescending. "That's what family does. They help each other." "Yes, family helps each other," I agreed. "But it should go both ways. What have you and Jessica done to help me lately? When was the last time either of you offered to help me with anything?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. None of them could recall a single instance where Jessica or Ryan had gone out of their way to help me with anything. "That's different," Jessica finally said. "You don't have children. You don't need our help." "So my needs don't matter because I don't have kids?" I asked, incredulous. "That's not how family is supposed to work." "I think you're being selfish," my mother declared, effectively ending the discussion. "Jessica and Ryan work very hard for what they have. They deserve a vacation, and you should be happy to help out." "And what about what I deserve?" I asked quietly. "Doesn't that matter at all?" No one answered. The remainder of the dinner passed in strained silence, with occasional forced attempts at changing the subject. I could feel my parents' disappointment and Jessica's anger radiating across the table. By the time dessert was served, it was clear that I had been cast as the villain of the family, the selfish aunt who didn't love her niece and nephew enough to watch them for free, while their parents enjoyed a luxury ski vacation. As I drove home that night, tears streaming down my face, I wondered how requesting fair treatment had somehow made me the bad guy in my own family's eyes. Little did I know things were about to get much worse. In the days following the disastrous family dinner, an uncomfortable silence fell between me and the rest of my family. I hadn't heard from Jessica, which was unusual, since she typically texted me several times a week about babysitting. My parents weren't calling either, which told me they were firmly in Jessica's camp. I was hurt, but also relieved to have some space to process my feelings. For so long, I had suppressed my resentment about being taken advantage of, and now that it was out in the open, I felt both liberated and terrified about what would happen next. My answer came 5 days after the dinner, when my phone pinged with a text from Jessica. Need you to watch kids Dec 18th to Jan 2nd for Aspen trip. We'll drop them off at your place at 7 a.m. on the 18th. No, please. No acknowledgement of our argument. Not even a question mark to indicate this was a request rather than a command. Just an expectation that I would fall in line as I always had. After several hours of anxiety and deliberation, I responded, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to watch Amy and Kevin for those 2 weeks unless we can agree on fair compensation for my time. Jessica's response was immediate and explosive. My phone rang within seconds of sending the text. What the hell is wrong with you? She shouted when I answered. Is this still about money? Are you really going to abandon your niece and nephew over a few dollars? It's not about the money, Jessica, I tried to explain calmly. It's about respect. It's about acknowledging that my time has value too. They're family, she screamed. You don't charge family, Bab. Family doesn't take advantage of each other either, I countered. That set off a tirade that lasted several minutes, during which Jessica accused me of everything from jealousy of her success to not really loving her children. When she finally paused for breath, I simply said, I'm sorry you feel that way, but my decision stands. Fine, she snapped. Don't expect to see Amy and Kevin again if this is how you're going to be. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me shaking and on the verge of tears. The threat of being kept from the children I loved so dearly was more painful than I could have imagined. The next day, both my parents called separately to berate me for my selfish behavior. My father was particularly harsh, telling me I was dead to him if I didn't apologize to Jessica immediately. My mother was more subtle but equally manipulative, suggesting that this behavior was why I was still single at 32, unlike my successful sister, who had managed to have it all. The family gossip machine went into overdrive. Within days, aunts, uncles, and cousins were calling or texting to express their disappointment in me. The story had been twisted so that I was now demanding thousands of dollars to watch the children, a complete fabrication that nonetheless was accepted as truth by my extended family. A week after our argument, I received an email from Jessica. It contained only a PDF receipt for a booking with an exclusive nanny service showing the astronomical amount they were paying for 2 weeks of childcare. The unspoken message was clear. See how much we're willing to pay strangers rather than give you a cent. That night alone in my apartment, I finally broke down completely. I sobbed for hours, grieving not just the loss of my relationship with Amy and Kevin, but the realization that my entire family valued me so little. Years of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of being the reliable, helpful middle child. And this was how they repaid me when I asked for the smallest recognition of my worth. The lowest point came a few days later, when I ran into Jessica at our local grocery store. I tried to smile and wave, hoping we could at least be civil in public, but she marched over hissing, "Don't you dare act friendly now." People turned to stare as she loudly proclaimed, "You know my children ask about their Aunt Lana every day, and I have to explain to them that you don't want to see them anymore unless we pay you. How do you think that makes them feel?" I was mortified both by the scene she was creating and by the knowledge that she was lying to Amy and Kevin about why I wasn't around. "That's not true, Jessica," I said quietly. "You know I love them. I just can't keep dropping everything in my life whenever you need a free babysitter." "Well, here's how it's going to be," she declared loud enough for several nearby shoppers to hear. "Either you go back to helping out like a normal family member for free, or you don't see the kids at all. Your choice." With that ultimatum hanging in the air, she stormed off, leaving me standing alone in the cereal aisle fighting back tears, as curious strangers pretended not to have witnessed my humiliation. That night I looked at photos of Amy and Kevin on my phone, their smiling faces bringing both joy and pain. The thought of not being part of their lives anymore was almost unbearable. But the thought of continuing to be taken advantage of teaching them that it was okay to devalue someone's time and effort, was equally unpalatable. For the first time, I realized I was truly at a crossroads. Either way, it seemed I was destined to lose something precious. The next 3 months were some of the loneliest of my life. True to her word, Jessica completely cut me off from Amy and Kevin. My texts asking how they were doing went unanswered. The weekly video calls we used to enjoy when I wasn't babysitting stopped entirely. It was as if I had ceased to exist in their lives. My parents continued to pressure me to apologize to Jessica. Just say you're sorry, my mother would plead during our increasingly strained phone conversations. Is your pride really worth losing your family over? The fact that they saw it as a matter of pride rather than principle told me how little they understood my position. Or perhaps they understood but didn't care, which was even worse. Thanksgiving arrived, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't welcome at the family gathering. My mother called the week before to tell me in a pained voice that it would be better for everyone if I didn't attend this year. Jessica is still very upset, she explained, and we don't want any drama around the children. I spent Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, eating a microwave dinner and watching old movies, trying not to think about my family gathered around my parents' dining table without me. Did they even talk about my absence? Did Amy and Kevin ask where I was? What lies were they told about why their Aunt Lana wasn't there to help them make the annual hand turkey drawings we'd done together for years? The isolation began to take a toll on my mental health. I found myself going through the motions at work, my usual enthusiasm for teaching dimmed by the weight of my family situation. My students noticed, and my principal called me in for a concerned conversation about my energy level in the classroom. I promised to do better, though I wasn't sure how. Thank goodness for my friends who rallied around me when they understood what was happening. My best friend Sarah was particularly supportive, inviting me over for dinner regularly and listening to me vent without judgment. Your sister is taking advantage of you, she said firmly one night after I'd recounted the whole saga. And your parents are enabling her. You were right to stand up for yourself. It helped to hear that from someone else, to know I wasn't crazy for feeling undervalued and used. But it didn't lessen the ache of missing Amy and Kevin, of wondering if they thought I had abandoned them, of imagining them growing and changing while I wasn't there to witness it. In late January, about 3 months after the initial confrontation, I had an unexpected encounter that would begin to change everything. I was leaving the coffee shop near my apartment when I literally bumped into Ryan, coffee splashing onto both our coats. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed automatically before realizing who it was. An awkward silence fell between us. "Lana," he finally said with a nod that was neither friendly nor hostile. "How are the kids?" I asked, unable to help myself. I miss them so much. Something in Ryan's expression softened slightly. "They miss you too," he admitted. "Kevin keeps asking when Aunt Lana is coming back." My heart clenched painfully. "Jessica won't let me see them unless I agree to provide free childcare whenever she wants," I said. "I can't do that anymore, Ryan. It's not healthy for any of us." Ryan sighed, glancing around as if worried someone might see us talking. "Look," he said in a lowered voice, "I'm not taking sides here, but for what it's worth, the nanny service Jessica hired has been really good, more professional than I expected. The kids are doing fine with them." I nodded, not sure what to say. Was that supposed to make me feel better? That professional strangers were doing fine with the children I loved? Ryan checked his watch. "I should go. I'm already late for a meeting." He hesitated, then added, "Jessica would kill me if she knew I told you this, but the kids really do miss you. Not as a babysitter, but as their aunt. Kevin still has that drawing he made for you hanging in his room, the one of the two of you planting tomatoes. And Amy asked if she could call you after she lost her first tooth last week. Jessica told her you were too busy." With that, he hurried off, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with tears in my eyes, and a mixture of gratitude for the information and fresh pain at what I was missing. The next week was Amy's 8th birthday. Though I knew it was probably futile, I couldn't let it pass without acknowledgement. I bought her a beautiful illustrated book of fairy tales, wrapped it carefully, and included a heartfelt card telling her how much I loved her and missed her. I sent the package to their house, addressed specifically to Amy. 3 days later, it appeared on my doorstep unopened with "Return to Sender" scrawled across it in Jessica's handwriting. That was my lowest point. Sitting on my apartment floor with the rejected gift in my lap, I felt a despair so profound it physically hurt. I had lost not just my niece and nephew, but my entire family, all because I had dared to assert that my time and effort had value. In trying to establish healthy boundaries, I had instead found myself completely cut off from the people I loved most. What made it even worse was knowing that Amy and Kevin were being told lies about why I wasn't in their lives anymore. They were too young to understand the complex dynamics at play. All they knew was that their aunt, who had been a constant loving presence, had suddenly disappeared. As I put the returned gift on a shelf in my closet, saving it for some unknown future date, when I might be allowed back into Amy's life, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake in standing up to Jessica. Maybe I should have just continued the way things were, swallowing my resentment for the sake of staying connected to the children. Maybe the cost of my self-respect was too high if it meant losing them. But even in my darkest moment, something in me refused to accept that. There had to be another way, a path forward that didn't require me to completely sacrifice my own well-being, or to permanently lose my connection with Amy and Kevin. I just hadn't found it yet. 6 months after the initial confrontation at Sunday dinner, my life had settled into a new, if less joyful, routine. I had thrown myself into my work, volunteering for extra responsibilities at school and focusing on making my classroom the best it could be for my students. I had started seeing a therapist who was helping me process the family estrangement and develop healthier boundaries in all my relationships. I had even gone on a few dates, though nothing serious had developed. I still missed Amy and Kevin terribly, but the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache that I had learned to live with. I had accepted, though not happily, that Jessica might never allow me back into their lives on terms that respected my worth. Then on a rainy Saturday morning in April, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found Jessica standing there looking frazzled and impatient with Amy and Kevin beside her. "I need your help," she said without preamble. "The nanny quit without notice, and I have a crucial meeting with a client in an hour. Ryan's out of town, and Mom and Dad are on that cruise. You're my only option." I stood frozen in the doorway, my emotions a whirlwind. Amy and Kevin were looking up at me with wide, hopeful eyes, clearly excited to see me after so long. I wanted nothing more than to sweep them into my arms and tell them how much I'd missed them. But Jessica's entitled attitude, her expectation that I would drop everything to help her after months of cruel silence, made me hesitate. "Please, Lana," Jessica added, seeming to sense my reluctance. "It's an emergency. I could lose this client if I miss this meeting." "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. Amy and Kevin immediately ran to hug me, and I knelt down to embrace them properly, my heart full at the feel of their small arms around my neck. "Aunt Lana, I lost 2 teeth," Amy exclaimed, showing me the gaps in her smile. "And I learned to tie my shoes," Kevin added proudly, pointing at his sneakers. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely thrilled to hear about these milestones I'd missed. "I've missed you both so much." Jessica cleared her throat impatiently. "So you'll watch them just for today. From now until about 6, I'll come straight back after the meeting." The old Lana would have agreed immediately, grateful for any time with the children. But I wasn't that person anymore. 6 months of therapy and reflection had strengthened my resolve to establish healthy boundaries, even with people I loved. "I'd be happy to watch Amy and Kevin," I said carefully. "But we need to discuss compensation first." Jessica's face darkened. "Seriously? We're back to this again. I'm in a crisis here. Lana." "I understand that," I replied calmly, "and I'm willing to help. But my time has value, Jessica. The nanny service you hired didn't work for free, did they?" "That's different," she snapped. "They're professionals." "So am I countered. "I'm a professional educator with years of childcare experience. The fact that I'm your sister doesn't negate that." Jessica looked at her watch anxiously. "I don't have time for this. How much do you want?" I named a fair hourly rate, less than what the nanny service charged, but still reasonable for professional childcare in our area. Jessica's eyes widened in outrage, but then she looked at her watch again, and her expression shifted to one of resignation. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, "but I want it known that I'm doing this under protest." "Noted," I replied, keeping my voice neutral for the children's sake. "We can discuss a more permanent arrangement later if you'd like." Jessica handed over the children's backpacks, gave them each a quick kiss, and hurried out, saying over her shoulder, "I'll be back around 6. Their lunch is in Kevin's bag." Once she was gone, I turned my full attention to Amy and Kevin. "I've missed you two so much," I said, giving them another hug. "Tell me everything I've missed." We spent the morning catching up. They told me about school, their friends, the new puppy they'd gotten for Christmas, and countless other details of their lives from the months I'd been absent. I listened attentively, asking questions and showing genuine interest, my heart both full at being with them again and aching at all I'd missed. Around noon, as I was preparing to serve the lunch Jessica had packed, Amy said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Mommy said you didn't want to see us anymore," she said matter-of-factly, taking a bite of her sandwich. "She said you were too busy with your own life." I carefully set down the apple I was slicing. "That's not true, sweetheart," I said gently. "I've wanted to see you and Kevin every single day. I've missed you both terribly." "Then why didn't you come over?" Kevin asked, his small face confused. How could I explain the complex adult situation to children so young, without disparaging their mother? I chose my words with care. "Your mom and I had a disagreement," I explained. "Sometimes grown-ups need time apart to work through their differences. But it was never because I didn't want to see you. I love you both very much, and I've thought about you every day." Amy seemed to accept this explanation, but Kevin had more to say. "I made you a drawing," he said. "After we planted the tomatoes at your house, Mommy wouldn't let me give it to you." "I'd love to see it someday," I told him, fighting back tears. "It's in my backpack," he said, brightening. "I bring it everywhere just in case I see you." He rummaged through his bag and proudly presented me with a slightly crumpled piece of construction paper. On it was a crayon drawing of two stick figures, one tall and one small, standing beside what looked like red circles growing on stalks. "Me and Aunt Lana growing tomatoes" was written across the top in wobbly letters. "It's beautiful," I said, genuinely touched. "I'll treasure it always." As the afternoon progressed, we fell back into our old rhythms. We read books, played games, and I helped them with the homework Jessica had packed. It felt so natural, as if the 6-month gap in our relationship had never existed. Around 4:30, Jessica called to check in. While I was talking to her, her phone beeped with another call. "Hold on, it's my boss," she said. "I need to take this. The kids are okay." "They're fine," I assured her. "Take your call." She switched over, but in her haste, she must have hit the wrong button, because suddenly I could hear both sides of her conversation. "Jessica, where are you with the Westfield briefs?" a stern male voice demanded. "You said you'd have them on my desk by 3. "I'm working on them now, sir," Jessica replied, her voice taking on a deferential tone I'd never heard from her before. "I had a family emergency this morning, childcare issues again, but I'm making good progress." "This is the 3rd family emergency this month, Jessica," the man said, his frustration evident. "And the 5th time the Westfield briefs have been delayed. I'm beginning to question your commitment to this partnership track." "I understand, sir. It won't happen again. My childcare situation is complicated since my sister stopped helping out." I felt a flash of indignation. So that's how she was playing it at work, blaming her professional shortcomings on my unwillingness to provide free childcare. It was also clear from the conversation that Jessica had been missing work deadlines long before our falling out, likely while still relying heavily on me for childcare. The call ended abruptly when Jessica realized I was still on the line. She called back immediately. "Did you hear that?" she demanded. "I did," I replied calmly. "It sounds like you've been having some challenges at work." "That's none of your business," she snapped. "I'll be there by 6 to pick up the kids." She hung up without saying goodbye. As I put my phone down, I felt a strange sense of clarity. For months, I'd been carrying the guilt of supposedly disrupting Jessica's perfect life by refusing to provide free childcare. Now I realized that the image she projected of effortlessly balancing her high-powered career and family life was largely a facade, one that had been maintained partly through my unacknowledged support and partly through deception. When Jessica arrived to pick up the children, I had made a decision. I would no longer allow myself to be manipulated by guilt or family pressure. I loved Amy and Kevin too much to disappear from their lives, but I also respected myself too much to go back to the old arrangement. It was time for a new approach, one that recognized both my love for the children and the value of my time and effort. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt hopeful that there might actually be one. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and drafted an email to Jessica. In it, I proposed a formal babysitting arrangement, a regular schedule fare, hourly compensation, and clear expectations on both sides. I emphasized that this wasn't about money, so much as respect and recognition of the value I provided. I kept my tone professional but warm, making it clear that my love for Amy and Kevin remained unchanged, and that I wanted to be part of their lives in a healthy, sustainable way. I also suggested a family meeting to clear the air and establish a new foundation for our relationships moving forward. I hesitated before hitting send, wondering if Jessica would even read it or if she'd dismiss it outright. But I reminded myself that I was asking for something reasonable, something that any professional childcare provider would expect as a matter of course. With a deep breath, I sent the email. To my surprise, Jessica responded later that day. Her reply was brief and not particularly warm, but she agreed to consider my proposal. "Ryan thinks it makes sense," she wrote. "We'll try it for a month and see how it goes." I suspected Ryan's influence had been significant in getting Jessica to agree, and I made a mental note to thank him when I had the opportunity. Regardless of how it had happened, this was progress. We worked out the details over the next few days. I would watch Amy and Kevin 2 afternoons a week after school and 1 Saturday a month, with additional dates by mutual agreement. Jessica would pay me a fair rate, though less than what she'd been paying the nanny service. Most importantly, the arrangement would be treated as the professional agreement it was, with clear boundaries and expectations. The first time I arrived at Jessica's house under the new arrangement felt strange, but also empowering. I was there as both a loving aunt and a professional, and there was no reason those two roles couldn't coexist harmoniously. Amy and Kevin were thrilled to have me back in their lives on a regular basis. We quickly fell back into our special activities and traditions, though now I had a budget for supplies and outings that didn't come out of my own pocket. Jessica was distant at first, clearly uncomfortable with the new dynamic. But as the weeks passed and she saw how happy the children were, she began to thaw slightly. The real breakthrough came about a month into our new arrangement, when my parents returned from their cruise and learned I was back in the children's lives. My mother called immediately, her voice a mixture of relief and confusion. "Jessica tells me you're babysitting again, but she's paying you," she said, the question evident in her tone. "That's right," I confirmed. "We've worked out an arrangement that respects both my love for the kids and the value of my time." "I don't understand why this was necessary," my mother sighed. "Family helps family, Lana. That's how it's always been." "Did you know that in the 3 months before our falling out, I watched Amy and Kevin for over 200 hours? I asked. "Did you know I spent nearly $1,000 of my own money on activities and supplies for them? Did you know I used all my vacation days to watch them while Jessica and Ryan went to Europe?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Jessica never mentioned any of that," my mother finally said, her voice smaller. "No, she wouldn't have," I replied. Just like she didn't mention that she was having problems at work long before I stopped providing free childcare, though she was quick to blame me for her missed deadlines. Another silence, longer this time. "Perhaps we were too quick to judge," my mother admitted reluctantly. "Your father and we've always been a bit harder on you than on Jessica. I don't know why. Maybe because she seemed to need more support, being so driven and ambitious." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from my mother before. "I'd like to clear the air with everyone," I said. "Could we have a family dinner at your house next Sunday, all of us together like we used to do?" My mother agreed readily, perhaps too readily, making me suspect she'd been missing the family gatherings as much as I had. The family dinner was tense at first. My father was still coldly formal with me. Jessica was defensive, and even Ryan seemed unsure how to act. Only Amy and Kevin were completely natural, delighted to have everyone together again. After dinner, while the children were playing in the next room, I finally spoke up. "I think we need to talk about what happened," I said. "All of us." Jessica immediately bristled. "There's nothing to talk about. We've worked it out. You're getting paid now, which is what you wanted." "It wasn't about the money, Jessica," I said firmly. "It was about feeling valued and respected. For years, I dropped everything whenever you needed childcare. I spent my own money, used my vacation days, canceled my own plans. I did it because I love Amy and Kevin, but somewhere along the line, my generosity stopped being appreciated and started being expected." My father started to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I'm not saying any of this to make anyone feel bad. I'm saying it because if we're going to move forward as a family, we need to acknowledge what happened and learn from it. To my surprise, Ryan spoke up. She's right, he said, looking at Jessica. We took advantage of Lana's good nature. We should have offered to compensate her long ago, especially given how often we were asking her to babysit. Jessica looked like she wanted to argue, but instead let out a long sigh. Fine. Maybe we did take you for granted, she admitted grudgingly. But you could have said something sooner instead of blowing up at that dinner. You're right, I acknowledged. I should have spoken up earlier. I was afraid of creating conflict, so I let resentment build up until it exploded. That's on me, and I'm sorry for how I handled it. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I owe you an apology, Lana, she said, her voice wavering slightly. I dismissed your feelings and your worth. I made you feel less valuable than your sister, and that was wrong of me. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. I was too harsh, he admitted gruffly. What I said about you being dead to me. I didn't mean it. I was just angry. I felt tears welling up, but blinked them back. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot to me. Jessica didn't offer a full apology that day, or even in the months that followed. It wasn't in her nature to admit she had been wrong. But over time, our relationship did improve. The formal babysitting arrangement gave our interactions a structure and clarity that benefited us both. She respected my time more, and I felt valued for my contribution to her children's lives. With the money I earned from babysitting, I was able to take a summer teaching workshop I'd always wanted to attend, enhancing my professional skills and reigniting my passion for teaching. I also started dating more seriously, eventually meeting David, a kind and thoughtful man who appreciated my commitment to my family, but also supported my need for healthy boundaries. My relationship with Amy and Kevin deepened in new ways. Without the constant undercurrent of resentment I had previously felt, I was able to be more fully present and engaged with them. I took genuine pleasure in teaching Amy to ride a bike that summer, something Jessica had never found time to do herself. As I watched Amy wobbling down the sidewalk, gaining confidence with each push of the pedals, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. By standing up for myself, I had temporarily lost my connection with these children I adored, but ultimately gained a healthier, more sustainable way to be part of their lives. There were still occasional tensions with Jessica, moments when the old dynamics threatened to reassert themselves. But I had learned the difficult but crucial lesson that family love doesn't mean martyrdom, that respecting yourself doesn't mean loving others less, that healthy boundaries are not just beneficial, but necessary for genuine, lasting relationships. The journey had been painful, but as I looked at my life now, I couldn't regret it. I had a better relationship with my parents, who were slowly learning to see me as an individual with my own worth, rather than just Jessica's sister. I had a fair professional arrangement that allowed me to be part of Amy and Kevin's lives without sacrificing my own well-being. And perhaps most importantly, I had found a new sense of self-worth that extended beyond my role as the helpful, accommodating middle child. Family relationships are complicated, messy, and deeply emotional. There's no perfect solution, no magic formula for navigating the complex web of expectations, history, and love that binds us together. But I've learned that mutual respect is non-negotiable, even between siblings, even between parents and children. Without it, love becomes distorted, twisted into something that hurts rather than heals. As Amy finally managed to ride her bike all the way to the end of the block without wobbling, her face lit up with pride and joy. I did it, Aunt Lana, she called back to me. I really did it. You sure did, sweetie. I called back, my heart full. I knew you could. In that moment, I realized that this was what really mattered, being present for these small but significant moments in the lives of the people I loved, but doing so in a way that honored my own worth as well. It had been a difficult road to get here, but looking at Amy's triumphant smile, I knew it had been worth every step. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who took your generosity for granted? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found my experience relatable, subscribe for more real-life family stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to value themselves even when family pressures say otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true family love is built on mutual respect, not one sided sacrifice.